Is this the creation of a legitimate state? Or is this terrorism from above creating an outlaw state? If it's an outlaw, does Israel have a moral right to security, enforceably claiming the property of others? You see, the military administration forced on Palestinians still living in Israel created an apartheid state. I'm going to talk maybe later in the discussion period of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Maybe you remember Tutu, the black South African Anglican prelate who urged internationally a boycott, divestment, and sanctions policy to get the Afrikaner racist government in South Africa to fold. By the way, that Tutu is now calling for the same boycott, divestment, and sanctions policy to be used around the world against Israel until it becomes a democracy. The Methodist Church, I'm in a Methodist church, the Methodist Church has already taken the stand that we should boycott products made in those illegal settlements in the West Bank and the Golan Heights. And this summer, the Methodist Church will be voting to boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The Presbyterian Church already has. And I've got documents that I want to share with you about that. The military segregated Palestinians during this period of administration, segregated Palestinians not only from Jewish society but also from one another. From 48 to 66, Palestinians were restricted from travel from one village to another. Gatherings of politically minded Palestinians were prohibited. Roads were closed to Palestinians. Land was expropriated. Economic subsidies for Jewish settlements encouraged takeover. This is the country that says we're the only democracy in the Middle East, which of course isn't true. Lebanon is in the Middle East. Turkey is in the Middle East. Those aren't democracies. I don't know what the word means. Palestinian populations were expelled, and refugees were denied return to their homes and their orchards. Jews invoked the law of return, which means a Jew from anywhere in the world, even if not returned, a Jew born in Miami goes to Israel, instantly can set foot on the ground and can be recognized as an Israeli citizen. A Palestinian born there, or whose family goes back there hundreds of years, cannot return. Now, what does that say about human rights? I'm going to do a little sidetrack here. I've been in refugee camps. For example, in Gaza, I taught in Gaza. I visited a refugee camp. In English, it's called beach camp. I don't speak Arabic, so I asked my interpreter, this young fellow, I said, "Where are you from?" He went back into his little shack and came out with documents, deeds to property in what is now called Israel. He can't return. He's in a squalid refugee camp where the sewer system is a little ditch running down the middle of a dirt path where water gets tanked in and which gets bombarded 3 times in 6 years. Bedouin Arabs in the Negev were herded into reservations. Intermarriage between Jews and Arabs was prohibited. The government consistently allocated less money for Palestinian education, housing, and municipal services than for Jewish communities. Ben-Gurion's mind was clear. He said, it's better to expel them than imprison. I remember once talking to a Jewish captain in the Israeli army who was willing to have a conversation with me. And I said, I was telling him about some of this. I said, what do you think? He said, to tell you the truth, I have trouble looking in the mirror in the morning. But I have a job to do. And Israeli soldiers had escorted me out at gunpoint out of the Haitian refugee camp outside of Bethlehem. I said to them, you think you're doing the right thing? And they said, we have a job to do. And I said, you know, that was the defense at Nuremberg. So I guess I'm lucky I'm here. I'm going to urge you to read any of the Jewish historians listed on the sheet I distributed. Consider for yourself the facts. Draw your own conclusion. And here's my conclusion. Not only is a two-state solution impossible because of Israel's confiscation of Palestinian land held since '67, but even Israel within the pre-'67 borders is illegitimate. I remember George Bush, as president, saying, how do you make a state out of a piece of Swiss cheese? Meaning little bantustans, you see, disconnected one from the other. Look at a map today and see what's left of Palestinian areas not under Israeli control. I'm maintaining a conclusion that the only just solution is one state, secular and democratic in all of historic Palestine. That doesn't mean driving Jews into the sea. It doesn't require the shedding of one drop of blood. South Africa, in the end, demolished its apartheid state in a negotiated settlement and replaced it with a democracy. The same can, and I predict, will happen in Israel-Palestine. I may not live to see it, but it's the only just solution and really the only realistic solution. It does mean the end of a Jewish state, just as South Africa experienced the end of a white Afrikaner state. But what results is people living together with equal human and political and social rights. It means return of Palestinian refugees and their families to their homes from which they were unjustly expelled. Folks, there are old people in those refugee camps who can show me hanging around their neck the key to the front door of that home. I'm talking about a genuine democracy replacing a rogue state which is going to die of gluttony. I said that in a letter published in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel a couple of weeks ago. I got a phone call early in the morning from a person, and our call waiting, or caller ID, private number, no name. And he proceeded to let loose. I didn't even tell my wife what the idiot had to say. But I'm calling for a democracy. I was told by a person in Milwaukee who is high up in the Jewish Federation there, Bob, that's an extremist position to call for a democracy. Is it impossible, folks? You may say that this sounds nice, but what are you smoking? Well, the Western world was surprised by the collapse of the Soviet Union, by the tearing by Peace in Northern Ireland, agreed to by Ian Paisley. My God, Ian Paisley, for 50 years had shouted, never, never, never. It happened. You know, last October, the British Parliament, Britain, I mentioned a number of years, the British Parliament overwhelmingly rebuked Israel, voting 274 to 12 to recognize the Palestinian state over Israel's objection and lobbying. Already, 134 United Nations member states 134 have extended diplomatic recognition to the state of Palestine. If we are concerned about justice, we have a role to play. Don't we have a duty? It's our country that alone makes it possible for this historic injustice to continue. And I acknowledge, as a solitary individual, you alone can't change it. But you can join organizations. I list some of them, like U.S. Campaign to End the Occupation, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. And I told you, let's make a distinction between Jews and Zionists. Two of the heads of U.S. Campaign to End the Occupation are dear friends of mine. They're Jews. Josh Rubner and Anna Balser. In Milwaukee, we just created a chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace. Now listen, I'm a member. Somebody wants to tell me I'm an anti-Semite. I say I'm a Semite. And I grew up here in Dallas. On the front porch of my neighbors across the street, Jews. The Ullmans and the Wohlbergs. The closest people to me in this world after my parents. Nobody calls me an anti-Semite. Because I remind them of the Jews who stand with me in this cause. I spoke at the University of Illinois, Chicago, just a week ago. Sitting beside me was Miko Pellet, whose book, The General's Son, is causing him to have speaking engagements all around this country. His father, Maggie Pellet, was a general in Israel's army in the 1967 war, confiscating land. He's a hero. He became a peacenik and warned Israel that it was headed for disaster if it continued to occupy the Palestinians unjustly. He came to be called a self-hating Jew. Now his son, the general's son, he speaks more strongly than I do. He was sitting there right beside me. A Jew, but certainly not a Zionist. And on the same panel, another Jew, a spokesperson for Jewish Voice for Peace in Chicago. I was in the Twin Cities 2 weeks ago. I was introduced to a woman. I was told she is at the core of the organization supporting Palestinian rights in the Twin Cities. A Jew. Make your views known to your members of Congress, folks. Provide a bit of financial support for refugee assistance. Join our human rights organizations. That's in your power to do. Congress today is Israeli-occupied territory. You know, really. I got a governor in Wisconsin prostrating himself before Sheldon Adelson billionaire casino magnate who pours money into buying support for Israel from politicians. And Governor Scott Walker's heading to Israel next month. And he told Sheldon Adelson, "You don't realize how Jewish I am." He went to Marquette University, my university. He didn't graduate, but he went. Scott Walker says, "Hey, at Christmas time, I got a menorah in my living room." Congress today is Israeli-occupied territory, but it need not be. As far back as 1982, I visited my congressman in the Milwaukee area. And he said, "Bob, I agree with you. But you're the first person I have heard from complaining about U.S. blank check support for Israel. And every day I hear in my home office, Jews are lined up to lobby for Israel." So whose fault is this? See? Whose fault is this? Jews are 2% of the population in this country, folks. 2% and declining. And the battle is not against all Jews. Okay? It's Zionism that's the cancer. That's the racism. That's expressing the religious bigotry and the confiscation. I want to conclude. But this is a Methodist church. This is a Christian community. And I have to say a word about those right-wing evangelical Christians who are cheerleaders for Israel and so influential in lobbying Congress. You know, folks, they are indifferent to the plight of the Christians in the Holy Land who happen to be Palestinians and who are fast disappearing. I've been to Nazareth, I've been to Bethlehem, I've been to Jerusalem, but Christians are disappearing. And there's a reason for that. These evangelical Christians trumpet Jews as God's chosen people, ignoring Jesus' own words when he said, and I'm a philosopher, not a theologian, but I read Scripture, I read theology, I study theology. And I find Jesus saying, "Do not tell me you have Abraham for your father. I tell you, God can from these very stones raise up children of Abraham." That's in Luke and in Matthew. Jesus, you know, was continually damning Jewish authorities. Brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs full of rot. There's an anti-Semite for you. Jesus, a self-hating Jew, right? Jewish authorities, tombs full of rot. Who could get away with saying that publicly on TV in this country today? See, Jesus was nailed up for a very good reason. That's why the Jewish authorities ganged up with the Roman authority to crucify him. But of course, it's not politically correct to say that Jews collaborated in killing Jesus. But why don't they read the New Testament if they're committed Christians? These evangelicals who cherry pick in the Bible also ignore the words of the epistles. St. Paul, Romans. By the way, I've been told St. Paul's an anti-Semite. God shows no partiality. Romans 2:11. Romans 10:12. There is no distinction between Jew and Greek. There's the same Lord of all. Paul again. No longer is there Jew or Greek. No longer is there slave or free man. No longer is there male or female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. Galatians. Here there is no Gentile, no Jew, no circumcised, no uncircumcised, no barbarian, no Scythian, no slave, no free man. Christ is everything in each of us. Colossians. We have to beware people who proclaim themselves God's chosen people as they trample on the human rights of others. You know, white Afrikaners in South Africa said they were God's chosen people, enslaving black natives. Pioneers in the United States proclaimed themselves God's chosen people while they slaughtered the native Indians. I had an uncle who brought back for me a souvenir from fighting in World War II. It was a Nazi belt buckle. And over the swastika are the words, God with us. So please educate yourself. You're not acting alone. There are plenty of folks to link with. And if you do nothing else, you can sign up to support organizations of others willing to fight for human rights. The goal is worthy. Justice.